Hey, this is Brian with Redefined-Life. First, I want to thank everybody that viewed my welcome video there and liked and subscribed. I appreciate that. And one of the things that I really wanted to do on this channel, along with the biblical side of things, is keep Christians, and whether you're a believer or not a believer, but laws in this country get passed, whether it's state, local, or federal, and we don't know about them. They're just kind of slid in, and by the time that the public is made aware of them, well, it's a little bit too late. And I ran across this article tonight, and I wanted to get it out there because there's some serious implications from it. And it's kind of right before the election, and everything just kind of lines up. So as we get into this, I will document all of my sources, so that you guys are able to go back and actually look at the source documents and read them for yourselves. I think that's very important. I want people to know that if I put something out there, I have spent the time and dug into the relevant reference material and done as best I can to interpret that and get it out there to you. If I find something out there that needs to be corrected, I'll do a follow-up video on it, and we'll take that as it goes. So let's get started. So I do a lot of keeping up with the news as best I can here, and I ran across this article, and it kind of threw me for a loop. And there's so much fake news, narratives that are being created that are not really factual. There's half-truths out there that, whether it's the government or people or organizations, they put these little nuggets of truth out there, but when you look at the whole thing, it's not really necessarily truth. So when I came across this particular article here, I thought, wow, this isn't really true. It can't be, right? So I go and I follow up to another source, and they're saying the same thing. And then I go to the actual government websites and I look through the changes that they have done. Yeah, and it's there. So it's an election season, and with it ain't gonna matter who wins. We're in for a rough transition, I think, regardless of which party wins. And it's just really amazing that this change was made and nobody really knew about it. Let's go over here. Let's just read the article first, and then we'll kind of bounce around a little bit. So this is ZeroHedge. It's an article from them. And the title said, U.S. military now authorized to kill Americans on U.S. soil, ? Okay, so this article was published on Saturday, October 12th of 24 here. So it says here, let me highlight this so you can read along with me. It says, just ahead of, intriguingly, the November election, the United States military has granted itself permission to unleash lethal force on civilian population in case of national security emergency. So national security emergency, that's an interesting keyword there, because we're going to have to look and see what they actually deem as a national security, because what they deem as a national security grants them permission for their lethal force. So we come down here a little bit further. I'm going to make sure y'all can see that. Okay. So it says here, as the U.S. prepares for one of the most controversial and closely watched elections in history, a concerning update to the DOD Directive 5240.01. Now we want to keep this 5240.01 here. We're going to look those directives up from the actual DOD website, so we can pull those, from the government website, so there isn't any question. We know what they're saying here. We have the actual documentation from that. Has quietly been put into effect. And quietly is another term that's interesting to look at because it hasn't been published in the mainstream news that I have not seen. This is a reissued on September 27th of 2024. This directive governs the Department of Defense, the DOD, intelligence activities, and how includes provisions authorizing lethal force in certain circumstances when assisting civilian law enforcement. So here we are, we're going to use DOD assets, which is, the Department of Defense. That's the Army, Air Force, Navy. and we're going to be assisting the local law enforcement. While the directive forbids assassination, now that's a very interesting thing that was thrown into this. Why would this have to be mentioned along with this? And it's just coincidental because we've had that in the news recently. But it does open the door to lethal intervention under national security conditions. The reissuance of this DOD Directive 524001 repealed the previous version, including the 1982 DOD 5240.1R. While the update might seem routine, the changes in it, though, regarding the use of lethal force in domestic operations are significant. We have foreign and domestic, foreign's outside of the U.S., domestic's inside of the U.S. So these changes are affecting our domestic operations here within the United States. Let me pull this up here. It says in the 2016 version, the directive primarily focused on intelligence collection and ensuring the civil liberty protections for U.S. persons. It emphasized strict oversight and the need for authorization before collecting U.S. persons' information. Now we look at the 2024 here. It says, however, the 2024 version expands the military's role, particularly in assisting civil law enforcement, and authorizes lethal force under specific conditions, raising questions about its use during potential civil unrest surrounding the election. See, this potential civil unrest, I don't know what you guys think, but I think that's coming. But yet we've now included this in this new update that authorizes this. Now, some things I just can't say on YouTube here, so I'm going to highlight it there. And this is starting in here, section 3.3A to C. Now, I've got the pages pulled up. We'll actually look at those documents directly, but this is a highlight of those pulled from that. But I will show you those so that you guys can actually see them for yourselves. Okay, so the subject to paragraph 3.1, it's the defense intelligence components may provide personnel to assist the federal departments or agencies, including a federal law enforcement agency or a state or local law enforcement agency, when lives are in danger in response to a request for such assistance in accordance with the following approval authorities. So let's unpack that just a little bit here. They're going to provide resources for state and local law enforcement when they've requested the assistance when the lives are in danger. So when lives are in danger, your local law enforcement could be contact, the government. They could issue these assets from the Department of Defense. They do require a Secretary of Defense approval, but there is a caveat to that later on we'll talk about. The Secretary of Defense may approve any type of requested permissible assistance described in paragraph 3.2. The decision for approval requests for these types of permissible assistance described in 3.2 to local law enforcement, it just says law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities, are reserved to the Secretary of Defense. Provision of personnel to support response efforts for the civil disturbances, which may also require presidential authority. And there's your civil disturbances. The DOD response to chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and high-yield explosive incidents. And this is where we start getting into it right here. The assistance in responding with assets, now this is DOD assets, which is military, let's start here. Assistance in providing with assets with potential for lethality or in any situation in which it is foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death and serious bodily injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in situations where a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. So here we got to unpack some of this too. We're talking about civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. So it doesn't have to happen. It can just be anticipated. And this assets can be deployed for the local law enforcement use. We come on down here. The U.S. military, for the record, is expressly prohibited from engaging domestically with any citizenry with very specific narrow exemptions per the Paz-Cantomas Act. I can't even say that, but you can read it right here. And that's the U.S. Code 1385. And that just states here, whoever, except in cases and under circumstances expressly authorized by the Constitution or Act of Congress, willfully uses any part of the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, or the Space Force as a posse contumace or otherwise to execute the law shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both. And I do want to give credit here to ZeroHedge for their work in this, and then Ben Barty, if that's how you say his name, for his contributions to this article here. And I wanted to just show everybody too, just so you guys know, this is from the Department of Defense's website. And it just shows here that the Department of Defense is America's largest government agency, but it's to provide the military forces needed to deter war and ensure our nation's security. So when we are talking about the DOD, this is what we're talking about, our U.S. military. This is the Washington Headquarters Services, and this is where they release published DOD issuances. So as you can scroll down through these, we can see here's that 5240.01. All right, so let's look at the actual directive, the 5240.01, and this is the September 27th, 2024, and the cleared for public release. We're going to scroll down here to 3.2. And this is the permissible assistance. This is what they are allowed to give to local law enforcement. And we're going to go to subsection 3 right here. And it's, get this so you guys can kind of follow along. It says providing specialized equipment, technical knowledge, or a system of expert personnel for use by any federal department or agency, or when lives are endangered to support state or local law enforcement agencies. So let's unpack that a little bit. We're talking about the military here, and the military has all kinds of specialized equipment, and probably stuff as civilians now have no idea what kind of capabilities that they have, but now that's going to be authorized underneath this particular change that they made here. Expert personnel, there's people that can take out people from long distances that now can be aided to the local and state law enforcements here. The interesting... It's for use when lives are endangered to support these agencies. So they've thrown this little caveat in here too, is when these lives are endangered. So, it's all about these little keywords and little phrases that make it where they can legitimately do some of this stuff. So you'll see these catchphrases, I call them keywords sometimes, that they're thrown in there, and it's just like this one little instance that gives you permission to do it, but it's in there so we can go ahead and do it. And you'll see that, through legal documents and stuff here. Let's see. When lives are endangered, to render any lawful assistance to law enforcement agencies or other civil authorities, provided such assistance is consistent with and has been approved by the official pursuant to Section 2 of this issuance. So when lives are endangered, here we go again, that this whole thing can be implemented with the approval, and they've lined that out in subsection 2 there. And then this is the other important thing we want to take a look at right here. So the assistance in responding with these assets with potential for lethality, or any situation in which it is reasonable foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious bodily injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in situations where a confrontation between civil law enforcement and a civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. Now, there's some more unpacking to do here. So we're talking about the assets. This is the military DOD assets, that they have this potential for lethality. So we're going to give local and state law enforcement what they need to combat whatever threat that they perceive that they have. So that coming into anything that's between confrontations between confrontations between civilian law enforcement and then the civilian individuals or groups where it's reasonably anticipated. So we talked about that in the article is it doesn't have to happen, but if it's reasonably anticipated that something is going to happen, they can respond with these assets that have the potential for lethality. It's reasonably foreseeable that if they use these, this type of a force, it's going to result in a lethal force, and it's going to include death or serious bodily injury. And then when you come down here, the provision to use DOD unmanned systems in the United States. So now they are allowing for unmanned drones to be used. So I mentioned earlier that there was a caveat to this, and here it is right here. These circumstances right here. So when a person's life or physical safety is reasonably believed to be in imminent danger and time does not prevent the Defense Intelligence Component head to obtain the approval through the Undersecretary or the Secretary of Defense in accordance with paragraph 3.3. So they don't have to get actual approval. It's like, we'll do this and we'll ask for forgiveness later if they believe that a person's life or physical safety is in imminent danger, reasonably believed to be in imminent danger. So see, there's another one of those little caveats that's thrown in there that it's reasonably believed imminent danger. And time doesn't permit that the Department of Defense gets the approval to them that they can go ahead and issue this and proceed. And then they put this in here that the Defense Intelligence Component will immediately report the details of the assistance to the Undersecretary or the Secretary of Defense as appropriate. The Defense Intelligence systems may not continue for no longer than 72 hours without the approval of the Undersecretary or Secretary of Defense. So what they're saying is that they, if there's this need that they feel that a person's life or physical safety is in imminent danger and time doesn't permit for this, just go ahead and do it. By the time things are caught, or it's already going to have progressed to the point that you may not undo what has been done. So those needed approvals to maybe to keep things kosher for everything can potentially get bypassed, because if they deem that a person's life or physical safety is in imminent danger, they can go ahead and implement this stuff. And then they've got 72 hours to come back and get the approvals. And if the approval, say, is denied, if they don't get the approval, but it gets denied, the damage is already done. So when we start giving all this authority for people without good check and balance systems, this could be leading into some potential problems. So I want to look at FBI and Homeland Security's assessment here for this right here, because that's really what this new policy change really is where it's going to be at. So let's go down here to their actual assessment. And this is going to be some of the things that they are listing as these incidences that could be involved that would allow the military usage in for these local law enforcement and state law enforcement here. So anything, and I'm not going to say these on YouTube, but I'm going to highlight them here. So just think about, as we look at these real quick, that we can easily see in the news and stuff where things are happening that could qualify under any of these, some of these titles here. So we have that. And in the way that things get labeled in the media, a lot of times, they kind of tend to almost say these words in a way. You know, we've got a presidential candidate that is being labeled the worst thing that could, affect our nation, for instance. If you've watched the news, you'll know what that actual comments was said about him. But it's easy to see how some of that stuff that's happening could very easily be put under this assessments and these things that they're considering domestically that could potentially be a problem. So, we got to be aware of this kind of stuff, like this one, for instance, from a biblical perspective. If you were standing outside of a abortion clinic as a Christian, just praying for the clinic. We've already seen problems for people that are into this, but see, just that alone, it could be related up underneath this. You get the right person that wants to push that, for instance. So there's all this stuff that's just tying together, and it's just with the timing of everything that we really have to be concerned with. As we get talking over the course of these future videos and stuff, you'll see how easy it is, that things can be very easily manipulated, to fit an agenda, and getting this information out to people to where hopefully I can show people how the terminology that's being used, the laws that are on the books, there's a purpose behind all that. And the more informed we are as people, hopefully, that we can combat some of this stuff. And from a biblical perspective on this is our nation's in a very, very bad situation right now. And, we need all the prayer that we can get for this nation. We need Christians to stand up. If you're a young Christian, middle-aged, older Christians, if somebody my age or something, I'm going to be right in the middle of it. Then you've got the younger generation that that are coming into this. This will be their way of life. They won't know anything else. And then you've got the older generation, and I almost think it's more important for the older generation of Christians to really start combating some of this stuff, because they've got more knowledge than somebody that would say a younger generation. They've experienced more. They have more things to bring to the table, that they can use life experiences. They can see the way that the world was when it was much better than it was now. And they're going to leave, when they pass on, they're are going to leave family, grandkids, great grandkids. They're the ones that's going to have to be dealing with this culture now. So I really would want to encourage everybody, no matter what, kind of age range or bracket you're in, that, that we start to stand up from this stuff. Because if Christians and we don't start to do this, I'm almost to the point that we can't come back from it. And that's a scary thought. So thanks for watching. If you haven't liked the video yet, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do that. It helps promote the channel, and I'll do my best to continue to bring you good content. And again, hopefully we can change the world for the best.